Hey everyone, Miss Aselson here. Today you're going to be working on Unit 3, LT4. And I'm looking here and this says LT3. You're actually on the right video. This should be 4. Basic factoring with the reverse box method. So this is going to be the exact same assignment or same notes that you did on your last assignment. We're just offering more practice with that. So if you remember right, the steps for factoring using the reverse box. First, you're going to set up and solve the x. And once that's set up, you're going to fill in your boxes with what you found for your x. You're going to pull out your GFCs and then write out your factors. So let's look at this one. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our x. Okay, and I'm going to take my a times my c, so 16 times that 1 right here, and I'm going to get 16 that goes on top, and then my 10 goes on the bottom. Okay, now I'm going to find all my factors of 16, and I know 1 and 16, I know 2 and 8, and I know 4 and 4. Okay, when I look at those, the only two that add up to 10 would be that 2 and that 8. So I'm going to put a 2 here and an 8 over on this side. Once I have those, I'm going to set up my box, but I'm going to replace this middle, that 10x, with that 2 and that 8. Okay, so the first step is draw your box. Then you're going to put what's in the box. Remember this first one, we're just going to put in the first spot. So we have 1x squared. And now we're going to replace the middle two with what we have on either side. So I have a 2x and not a 10x, an 8x. And finally, I'm going to have my c value. My c value is going in the last open box, so that's a 16. Okay, so now I have to determine what's in common. What's the greatest common factor? And let's start here. Between 1x squared and 2x. So I know that they both have a 1x in them. Okay, so now I'm going to go and find the greatest common factor between those two. And when I look at those, I have an 8 and a 16. And only the 8 has an x in it, so I know only a number is common in both of those. And I know 8 will go into 16. So I'm going to go ahead and put an 8 on the top. Now I'm going to look at the side. So I want to go this way. And I have a 1x squared and an 8x. And when I think about those two, they both have a 1 in common, because 1 and 8, they both have a 1 in there. And then they both also have an x. So my x is going to go by there too. And then finally, I'm going to look at my last one, which is going this way. And I'm thinking 2 and 16, or 2x and 16. Well, 2 and 16, they both have a 2 in them. And then 2 has an x, but 16 doesn't, so we can't use that. Okay, now we're going to take what we have on our top. That's going to be our first factor. So I'm going to say 1x, and because it's a positive 8, I'm going to say plus 8. And then I'm going to use what's going down the side, 1x plus 2. And that's my final answer for that one. Okay, so let's look at number 2. We have 4x squared plus 4x and then minus 3. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our x. And remember, first you take your a times your c. So I'm going to take that 4 times that. And remember to take it as a negative 3. So 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. And then our 4 goes in the middle of our b value. Okay, so now I'm going to find all my factors of 12. I know 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Okay? Well, when I look at these ones, I see that this 12 is negative. So that means that one of my factors has to be negative. Okay? And because the 4 is positive, that means that my smaller number is going to be the negative 1. Okay, so one of those is going to be negative. So negative 1 plus 12 gives me negative 11, so it can't be that one. Negative 2 plus 6 will give me that 4. So it's going to be our negative 2 and our 6. I'm going to go ahead and put a negative 2 on the left and a 6 on the right. Now I'm going to draw that box. And once I have the box drawn, I'm going to fill the inside in with what I have. And I'm going to replace these two here, or replace actually that 4x with those two there. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. So my beginning says 4x squared. So I'm going to start there. And then my two sides, I have a -2. And remember that has to have an x by it. And then a +6. And that one has to have an x by it. And then finally, I'm going to end with what I have, what my c value is. And because that's a negative number, I'm going to put a negative number in there. Okay, now to start off, I'm going to find the greatest common factor between these two. Okay, so I have my numbers are a 4 and a 2. Well, I know a 2 will go into 4, so my greatest common factor is going to be that 2. The 2 is negative, but the 4 is not, so it cannot be negative on the top. So it's just going to be a 2. And I see they both have an x, so I'm going to put an x on there too. Okay, now let's move over. And let's do these two. And I have a 6 and a -3. I know a 3 will go into 6. So I'm going to have a 3 on the top. Only the 6 has an x, so I'm going to leave that other x off. Okay, and then now let's move over to these two. Okay, I have a 4 and a 6. I know they're both even numbers, so that gets me started. And I know 4 won't go into 6, so I'm going to have to go a little bit smaller than that. So because they're even, I'm going to put a 2 there. And I see they both have an x, so I'm going to put an x out there too. Okay, and then finally I have the bottom, which is here. Okay, and I have a -2 and a -3. Well, because they're both negative, I know a negative number has to go into both of them. And then 2 and 3, the only number that will go into both of those is 1. And then I look, only the 2 has an x, but the 3 doesn't, so I don't have to put an x on that. So my first factor is going to be 2x plus 3. And my second factor is going to be 2x minus 1. And then I'm going to close those up. Okay, we're going to do more of the same here. We're going to start right away with our x. And we're going to take our a times our c. Remember, if there's no number in front, it's actually a 1. Okay, so 1 times that -12, you have to take that -12, is -12. And then again, if there's no number in front of this x right here, it's really a 1. So my b value is going to be a -1. So I'm going to go ahead and put a -1 in there. Okay, now I'm going to find all my factors of 12. So just like before, I know 1 and 12. I know 2 and 6, and I know 3 and 4. Okay, just like before, it's a -12. So I know one of my numbers, not both of them, but one of the numbers has to be negative. And because it's a -1, so when I look at my b value, because this is a -1, that means that the bigger of the two numbers is going to have to be negative. Okay, so this is going to be negative, this is going to be negative, and this is going to be negative. Okay, so 1 minus 12 is going to give me a -11, so that one doesn't work. 2 minus 6 is going to give me a -4, so that one doesn't work. But 3 minus 4, well, that one will give me that -1. So I'm going to use that 3 and -4 and stick those in. Okay, now that I have those, I can go ahead and write up my box. Okay, to start off, I have my a value right in my first box, so 1x squared. My b value, remember I'm replacing that with these two right here. So let me replace that. So I have 3x and -4x. And now I want my c value, which is a negative. Remember, you have to take that negative and put it in the bottom. Okay, once I have those, I'm going to look and see what do I have going across right here. So 1x and 4x. And you can do it in any order. I'm doing it a little bit different this time, but that's okay. It doesn't matter what order I go in as long as I find the greatest common factor between them. So 1 and 4, they both have a 1 in them, and I see that they both have an x in them. Okay, so now let's go down a row, and let's do this one right here. So I have a 3 and a negative 12. Well, I know 3 will go into 12, and only the 3 is negative. So I know it's just going to be that 3, and only the 3 has an x. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm not going to put an x on it. Okay, now I'm going to do these two right here. Okay, so 1x squared and 3x. Well, I know they both have a 1 in them, and they both have an x in them. Okay, and finally, I'm going to do these ones right here. I have a negative 4 and a negative 12. Because they're both negative, it's going to be a negative, and I know 4 will go into 12. So I'm going to put a 4. Only the 4 has an x, so I'm going to stop right there. So now I'm going to write my factors on my top. I have 1x minus 4, and I'm going to write my factors on going down the side. So I have 1x, and that's going to be a positive 3. Okay, let's start with this next one. Again, we're going to start with our a times our c. So I get 3 times 12, which is 36, and 13 on the bottom. Come over here, 36. I know 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 5 won't go in there, and then 6 and 6. So we got a whole lot to choose from, and if you're not sure how to do that, you know you can go ahead and do 36 divided by, you wouldn't have to divide it by 1, but 36 divided by 2, 36 divided by 3, 36 divided by 4, and you'll get all your factors there. Okay, so I need to make a 13. Well, they're all positive, so I know I don't have to stick a negative in, and I know 4 and 9 make that 13. So I'm going to put a 4 over here and a 9 over here. Draw my box. Start with my a value. So I'm going to say 3x squared. And then replace my b value. So I have a 4x and a 9x. And then go ahead and stick in my c value, which is a positive 12. Okay, maybe start, whoops, that's not what I want to do. Let's do this instead. So I have a 3x and a 4x. Well, I know they both have a 1 in common. And I know they both have an x in common. Okay, let's go to this one. I have a 9 and a 12. So I'm thinking that 9 won't go into 12, so I know that's not going to work. So I'm thinking what factors both have 9 and 12 in them? And I know a 3 will go into both a 9 and a 12. So I'm going to put a 3, and I don't have a letter. So I'm going to stop with that right there. And now I have a 3x squared and a 9x. And I know a 3 will go into 9. So I know my number's a 3, and I also have a letter. And then I have a 4x and a 12, and I know 4 will go into 12, so this is going to be a 4, and then just write my factors down. So I have a 1x plus 3 and a 3x plus 4. Okay, moving on to number 6. Multiply my a times my c. 6 times 2, 12. My b on the bottom. 1 and 12, and eventually you won't have to write these down. You can just think about what they are, and maybe you're already there, and that's great if you are. So what multiplies to 12 and adds to 7, I have all the factors there, and I know a 3 and a 4, so I'm going to put the 3 on the left, 4 on the right. It really wouldn't matter. I could put the 4 on the left and the 3 on the right. That doesn't matter as long as you have the numbers on both sides. I'm going to draw my square. Put my a value right here, 6x squared. Replace my b values. So I have a 3x and a 4x, and then I'm just going to plop in my c value, which is a positive 2. Okay, now I'm going to find everything that will go into both numbers or find the greatest common factor for each. So I'm going to start with Let's do 6x squared and 3x. So I know 3 will go into 6, so my number is going to be a 3. My greatest common factor is a 3, and then they both have an x. When I move over, I have a 4 and a 2, and I know that 2 will go into both of those. So my greatest common factor is a 2, and I don't need an x there. And then moving along, coming to the side here, I have a 6 and a 4. Well, they're both even numbers, and I know a 2 will go into both of those. So I'm going to stick a 2 on the outside, and they also both have an x. Okay, and a 3 and a 2. Well, the only number that will go into both 3 and 2 is 1. So I'm going to stick a 1 right there. Okay, now that I have all those on the side, I'm going to go ahead and write out my factors. So I have a 3x plus 2, and then a 2x plus 1. And then I'm done. Okay, number 6. 1. There's a 1 there. 1 times 20 is 20. 9 on the bottom. 20. And a 1 and 20. 2 and 10. 3 won't go in there. I have a 4 and a 5. And 5 is my next number, so I've rounded the bend, so I'm done there. I know 4 and 5 add up to 9, so put a 4 here and a 5 here. Start my box, put my a value, my top left, so 1x squared. Okay, then I'm going to write my b values, which are now 4x and 5x, and that equals that 9x. Then I am going to end with my c value, which is 20. Okay, when I'm looking at 1x squared and 4x, I know that they both have a 1x in them. Okay, moving over, I have a 5 and a 20. And I know that both of those have a 5 in them. And coming across, I know 1x squared and 5x. They both have a 1 in them. And they also both have an x in them. Okay, and then finally, 4 and 20. I know 4 will go into 20, so my greatest common factor is going to be that 4 and not an x. And then I just 1x plus 5 and 1x plus 4. All right, number 7. So when I'm looking at this, I know that I have a 1 in front of this x, and I also have a 1 in front of that x. And if you have to put those in there to help you remember that that's what they are, go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start with making my x. I have negative 20 times 1, which gives me negative 20, and then negative 1 down here. Okay, so I'm going to start my 20, 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 3 won't go in there, 4 and 5, and now we've rounded the bend because I'm on 5, so I can't go any further than that. Okay, so here's where that trick comes in. So I have a negative 1. Remember, if that's going to be negative, then your bigger number over here has to be negative. And only one of the numbers needs to be negative because the top is negative. So I'm going to have these, this, and this. Okay, so 1 minus 20 will give me a negative 19. 2 minus 10 will give me an 8. And 4 minus 5 will give me that negative 1. So I'm going to use these two right here. So I'm going to say 4 and then negative 5. Start my box. My A value goes here. B values are here. Oops, that one didn't come out. So 4x and negative 5x. And then my C, don't forget to take that negative in front, goes right there. Now we have to find the factors. So 1x and 5x, I know they both have a 1 and an x in them. And 4 and negative 20 I know that their greatest common factor is a 4, and there's no x. I'm going to go right here. 1x and 4x, they both have a 1 and an x in them. And then finally, I have a -5 and a -20. They both have a negative, so this has to have a negative. So -5 and -20, they both have a 5 in them. And there's only 1x, then I'm going to set up my factors. So 1x minus 5 and 1x plus 4. And you're done there. Okay, last one, number 8. Set up your x. Multiply your a times your c. 1 times 24. I get 24. My b is a 10. Put 24 on the side. And a 1 and 24. 2 and 12. 3 and 8. 4 and 6. There's no 5, and then I'm back at 6. So there we go. So I have to get to 10. Well, 4 and 6 fits that bill. So 4 here, 6 there. Set up my box. Put my a value in my top left. So I'm just going to say x squared. Remember, there's really a 1 in front of that. Replace my b values. So I have 4x, 6x, and end with my c value. And now just find the greatest common factors between all of them. So 1x squared and 4x. See, they both have a 1x in them. 6 and 24. I know they both have a 6 in them. I have a 1x and a 6x. They both have a 1 in them. And they also both have an x in them. And then, oops, I do that all the time. What that one? 4 and 24. I know they both have a 4 in them and no x. And then go ahead and write your factors. So 1x plus 6 and 1x plus 4. And there you go. So that's the end of LT 4 notes. Make sure you reach out if you have questions, but you are ready to move on to your homework.